The Frog King, or Iron Heinrich by the Brothers Grimm. In olden times, when wishing still helped one, there lived a king whose daughters were all beautiful, but the youngest was so beautiful that the sun itself, which has seen so much, was astonished whenever it shone in her face. Near the king's castle lay a great dark forest, and under an old lime tree in the forest was a well. When the day was very warm, the king's child went out into the forest and sat down by the side of the cool fountain, and when she was bored, she took a golden ball, threw it up high and caught it, and this ball was her favorite plaything. Now it so happened that the golden ball did not fall into the little hand, which she was holding up for it, but onto the ground beyond, and rolled straight into the water. The king's daughter followed it with her eyes, but it vanished, and the well was deep, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Then she began to weep, and cried louder and louder, and could not be comforted. As she thus lamented, someone said to her, "What ails you, king's daughter? You weep so that even a stone would show pity." She looked round to the side from whence the voice came, and saw a frog stretching forth its thick, ugly head from the water. "Ah, old water paddler, is it you?" she said. "I weep for my golden ball, which has fallen into the well." "Be quiet and do not weep," answered the frog. "I can help you, but what will you give me if I bring your plaything up again?" "Whatever you will have, dear frog," said she. "My clothes, my pearls and jewels, and even the golden crown which I am wearing." The frog answered, "I do not care for your clothes, your pearls and jewels, or your golden crown, but if you will love me and let me be your companion and playfellow, and sit by you at your little table, eat off your little golden plate, drink out of your little cup, and sleep in your little bed. If you will promise me this, I will go down below and bring your golden ball up again." "Oh yes," said she, "I promise you all you wish if you will but bring me my ball back again." She, however, thought, "How the silly frog does talk. He lives in the water with the other frogs and croaks, and can be no companion to any human being." But the frog, when he had received this promise, put his head into the water and sank down, and in a short while came swimming up again with the ball in his mouth, and threw it on the grass. The king's daughter was delighted to see her pretty plaything once more, and picked it up and ran away with it. "Wait, wait," said the frog. "Take me with you. I cannot run as you can." But what did it avail him to scream his croak, croak after her as loudly as he could? She did not listen, but ran home and soon forgot the poor frog, who was forced to go back into his well again. The next day, when she had sat down with the king and all the courtiers, and was eating from her little golden plate, something came creeping splish-splash, splish-splash, up the marble staircase, and when it had got to the top, it knocked at the door and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." She ran to see who was outside, but when she opened the door, there sat the frog whom she had forgotten. In great fright she slammed the door to, and sat down again at the table. But the king saw that her heart was beating hard, and said, "My child, what are you afraid of? Is there perchance a giant outside who wants to carry you away?" "Ah, no," replied she. "It is no giant, but a disgusting frog." "What does a frog want with you?" "Ah, dear father, yesterday when I was in the forest I sat by the well and played, and my golden ball fell into the water, and because I cried so the frog brought it out again for me, and because he insisted so. I promised him he should be my companion, but I never thought he would be able to come out of the water, and now he is outside there and wants to come in to me." In the meantime, it knocked a second time and cried, "Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me. Do you not know what you said to me yesterday by the cool waters of the well? Princess, youngest princess, open the door for me." Then said the king, "That which you have promised must you perform. Go and let him in." She went and opened the door, and the frog hopped in and followed her step by step to her chair. There he sat and cried, "Lift me up beside you." She delayed until at last the king commanded her to do it. When the frog was once on the chair, he wanted to be on the table, and when he was on the table he said, Now push your little golden plate nearer to me that we may eat together." She did this, but it was easy to see that she did not do it willingly. The frog enjoyed what he ate, but almost every mouthful she took choked her. At length he said, "I have eaten and am satisfied. Now I am tired. Carry me into your little room and make your little silk bed ready, and we will both lie down and go to sleep." The king's daughter began to weep and was afraid of the cold frog which she did not like to touch, and which was now to sleep in her pretty, clean little bed. But the king grew angry and said, "He who helped you when you were in trouble ought not afterward to be despised." So she took him up with 2 fingers, carried him upstairs and put him in a corner. But when she was in bed, he crept to her and said, "I am tired. I want to sleep as well as you. Lift me up, or I will tell your father." At this she was terribly angry, and took him up and threw him with all her might against the wall. "Now will you be quiet, odious frog?" But when he fell down, he was no frog, but a king's son with kind and beautiful eyes. He had been bewitched by a wicked witch, and no one could have delivered him from the well but the king's daughter, and tomorrow they were to go together into his kingdom. Then they went to sleep, and next morning, when the sun awoke them, a carriage came driving up with 8 white horses, which had white ostrich feathers on their heads, and were harnessed with golden chains, and behind stood the young king, a servant, faithful Heinrich. Faithful Heinrich had been so distressed when his master was changed into a frog, that he had had 3 iron bands laid round his heart, lest it should burst with grief and sadness. The carriage was to conduct the young king into his kingdom. Faithful Heinrich helped them both in, and placed himself behind again, and was full of joy because his master was set free. And when they had driven a part of the way, the prince heard a crack behind him as if something had broken. So he turned round and cried, "Heinrich, the carriage is breaking." "No, master, it is not the carriage. It is a band from my heart, which was put there in my great pain when you were a frog and imprisoned in the well. But now it is springing and full of joy because you are set free." Twice more the band cracked during the journey, and each time the prince thought the carriage was breaking, but it was only the bands which were springing from the heart of faithful Heinrich, because his master was set free and was happy. The 12 Dancing Princesses by Brothers Grimm. There was once a king who had 12 daughters, each more beautiful than the other. They slept together in one chamber, in 12 beds all in a row, and every night when they were in them the king locked the door and bolted it. But in the morning when he unlocked the door, he saw that their shoes had been danced to pieces, and no one could discover how it had happened. Then the king issued a proclamation that whoever could discover where they danced at night should choose one of them for his wife, and should be king after his death. But whoever came forward and did not succeed, after 3 days and nights, must forfeit his life. It was not long before a king's son presented himself, and offered to undertake the enterprise. He was well received, and at night was taken into a chamber adjoining the princess's sleeping room. His bed was placed there, and he was to watch where they went. And that he might not hear or see them, the door of their room was left open. But the king's son soon fell asleep, and when he awoke in the morning, he saw that the 12 had been dancing, for their shoes were all full of holes. The same thing happened the 2nd and 3rd nights, so his head was struck off without mercy. After many others had come forward in like manner, and had all lost their lives, it happened that a poor soldier who had been wounded and could no longer serve, found himself on the road to the city where the king lived. He met an old woman, who asked him where he was going. "I hardly know myself," answered he, and jestingly added, "I had a great mind to discover where the princesses danced their shoes into holes, and thus become king." "That is not so difficult," said the old woman. "You must not drink the wine which will be brought to you at night, and you must pretend to be fast asleep." With that, she gave him a cloak and said, "If you wear this, you will be invisible, and you will then be able to follow the princesses wherever they go." When the soldier had received this good advice, he took courage, went to the king, and announced himself as a suitor. He was as well received as the others, and royal garments were put upon him. In the evening at bedtime he was conducted to the antechamber. As he was about to go to bed, the eldest princess came and brought him a goblet of wine, but he had fastened a sponge under his chin and let the wine run down into it without drinking a drop. Then he lay down, and after a while began to snore very loudly, as if he were fast asleep. The 12 princesses laughed when they heard it, and the eldest said he too might have spared his life. Then they got up, opened cupboards, chests and drawers, and brought out splendid clothes, dressed themselves before the mirrors, sprang about, and rejoiced at the prospect of the dance. Only the youngest said, "I know not how it is you are very glad, but I feel very strange. Some misfortune is certainly about to befall us." "You are a goose," said the eldest, "always afraid. Have you forgotten how many kings' sons have already come in vain? I had not even to give the soldier a sleeping draught. The clown would not have wakened if we had shaken him." When they were quite ready, they looked carefully at the soldier, but he had shut his eyes and did not move or stir, so they believed they were safe. The eldest went to her bed and knocked. It opened at once, and they descended through the opening, one after another, the eldest going first. The soldier, who had seen everything, put on his cloak and went down too. In the middle of the stairs he trod on the gown of the youngest, who cried out with fear, "There is something not right. Did not somebody pull my gown?" "Don't be so silly," said the eldest. "You caught it on a nail." So they went down until they came to a splendid avenue of trees, all the leaves of which were of silver, and shone and glittered. The soldier broke off a twig, and there was a loud crack from the tree. The youngest cried out again, "Something is wrong. Did you hear the noise?" But the eldest said, "It is only a shot fired for joy, because we have got rid of our princes so quickly." Then they came into an avenue where all the leaves were of gold, and afterwards into a third where they were of clear diamonds. He broke off a twig from each, and every time there was a loud crack, which made the youngest start with terror. But the eldest still maintained that it was only the shots of joy. They went on until they came to a great lake, and at the shore lay 12 little boats, and in every boat sat a handsome prince who had been waiting for the 12. Each of them took a princess, and the soldier seated himself in the boat with the youngest. Then the prince said, "I do not know why the boat is so much heavier today. I shall have to row with all my strength if I am to get across." "What should make it heavier?" said the youngest, "but the hot air of the summer night." On the other side of the lake stood a fine, lighted-up castle, from which proceeded the sound of music of clarionets and trumpets. They rowed over, entered, and each prince danced with the princess he loved. The soldier danced likewise, though invisible, and when any of the princesses held a cup of wine, he drank it out, so that it was empty when she carried it to her mouth. The youngest was terrified at this, but the eldest always silenced her. They danced there till 3 o'clock in the morning, when all their shoes were danced to pieces, and they were obliged to leave off. The princes rowed them back again over the lake, and this time the soldier seated himself with the eldest. On the shore they took leave of each other, and the princesses promised to come again the following night. When they reached the stairs, the soldier ran on before and laid himself down in bed. And when the 12 came in slowly and wearily, he snored again very loudly, so that they said, "We are quite safe with him." They took off their beautiful clothes, put them away, placed the worn-out shoes under the beds and lay down. Next morning the soldier said nothing, for he wished to see the wonderful adventure again. The second and third nights he went again, and everything happened as before. Each time he carried away a token. On the third occasion he took a cup away with him. When the hour came for him to give his answer, he brought the 3 branches and the cup before the king. The 12 princesses stood listening behind the door, and heard what he said. The king asked, "Where do my 12 daughters dance their shoes to pieces in the night?" He answered, "With 12 princes in a castle underground," and described how he had seen everything and brought the tokens with him. Then the king summoned his daughters, and asked them if the soldier had told the truth. They saw that they were betrayed, and could deny nothing, and were obliged to confess all. Thereupon the king asked which of them he would have to wife. He answered, "I am no longer young, so give me the eldest." So they were married that very day, and the soldier was chosen as the king's heir. Rapunzel by Brothers Grimm. There were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it, because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion, Rapunzel, and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it. She quite pined away and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't eat some of the rampion which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man, who loved her, thought, "Sooner than let your wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself. Let it cost you what it will." At twilight, he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it, and ate it with much relish. She, however, liked it so much, so very much, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," said she with angry look, "to descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window, and such is her longing for it that she would die if she does not get some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened, and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man in his terror consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower which lay in a forest and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and went by the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her loneliness passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her and looked for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," said he, and the next day when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Immediately the hair fell down and the king's son climbed up. At first Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man such as her eyes had never yet beheld came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel does," and she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it, and when that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king or son. He is with me in a moment." "Ah, thou wicked child," cried the enchantress, "what do I hear thee say? I thought I had separated thee from all the world, and yet thou hast deceived me." In her anger she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice round her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip-snap they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day, however, that she cast out Rapunzel, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair which she had cut off to the hook of the window, and when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me," she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but instead of his dearest Rapunzel he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "thou wouldst fetch thy dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it and will scratch out thine eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to thee, thou wilt never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did naught but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel lived in wretchedness with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. And when he approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. 2 of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, so that he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happy and contented. Hansel and Gretel by Brothers Grimm. Hard by a great forest dwelt a poor woodcutter with his wife and his 2 children. The boy was called Hansel, and the girl Gretel. He had little to bite and to break, and once when great dearth fell on the land, he could no longer procure even daily bread. Now when he thought over this by night in his bed, and tossed about in his anxiety, he groaned and said to his wife, "What is to become of us? How are we to feed our poor children when we no longer have anything even for ourselves?" "I'll tell you what, husband," answered the woman. "Early tomorrow morning we will take the children out into the forest to where it is the thickest. There we will light a fire for them, and give each of them 1 more piece of bread, and then we will go to our work and leave them alone. They will not find the way home again, and we shall be rid of them." "No, wife," said the man, "I will not do that. How can I bear to leave my children alone in the forest? The wild animals would soon come and tear them to pieces." "Oh, thou fool," said she, "then we must all 4 die of hunger. Thou mayest as well plane the planks for our coffins." And she left him no peace until he consented. "But I feel very sorry for the poor children, all the same," said the man. The two children had also not been able to sleep for hunger, and had heard what their stepmother had said to their father. Gretel wept bitter tears, and said to Hansel, "Now all is over with us." "Be quiet, Gretel," said Hansel. "Do not distress thyself, I will soon find a way to help us." And when the old folks had fallen asleep, he got up, put on his little coat, opened the door below, and crept outside. The moon shone brightly, and the white pebbles which lay in front of the house glittered like real silver pennies. Hansel stooped and stuffed the little pocket of his coat with as many as he could get in. Then he went back again and said to Gretel, "Be comforted, dear little sister, and sleep in peace. God will not forsake us." And he lay down again in his bed. When day dawned, but before the sun had risen, the woman came, and awoke the two children, saying, "Get up, you sluggards, we are going into the forest to fetch wood." She gave each a little piece of bread, and said, "There is something for your dinner, but do not eat it up before then, for you will get nothing else." Gretel took the bread under her apron, as Hansel had the stones in his pocket. Then they all set out together on the way to the forest. When they had walked a short time, Hansel stood still and peeped back at the house, and did so again and again. His father said, "Hansel, what art thou looking at there and staying behind for? Pay attention and do not forget how to use thy legs." "Ah, father," said Hansel, "I'm looking at my little white cat, which is sitting up on the roof, and wants to say goodbye to me." The wife said, "Fool, that is not thy little cat. That is the morning sun which is shining on the chimneys." Hansel, however, had not been looking back at the cat, but had been constantly throwing one of the white pebble stones out of his pocket on the road. When they had reached the middle of the forest, the father said, "Now, children, pile up some wood, and I will light a fire that you may not be cold." Hansel and Gretel gathered brushwood together, as high as a little hill. The brushwood was lighted, and when the flames were burning very high, the woman said, "Now, children, lay yourselves down by the fire and rest. We will go into the forest and cut some wood. When we have done, we will come back and fetch you away." Hansel and Gretel sat by the fire, and when noon came, each ate a little piece of bread, and as they heard the strokes of the wood axe, they believed that their father was near. It was not the axe, however, but a branch which he had fastened to a withered tree, which the wind was blowing backwards and forwards, and as they had been sitting such a long time, their eyes closed with fatigue, and they fell fast asleep. When at last they awoke, it was already dark night. Gretel began to cry and said, "How are we to get out of the forest now?" But Hansel comforted her and said, "Just wait a little until the moon has risen, and then we will soon find the way." And when the full moon had risen, Hansel took his little sister by the hand, and followed the pebbles which shone like newly coined silver pieces, and showed them the way. They walked the whole night long, and by break of day came once more to their father's house. They knocked at the door, and when the woman opened it and saw that it was Hansel and Gretel, she said, "You naughty children, why have you slept so long in the forest? We thought you were never coming back at all." The father, however, rejoiced, for it had cut him to the heart to leave them behind alone. Not long afterwards, there was once more great dearth throughout the land, and the children heard their mother saying at night to their father, "Everything is eaten again. We have 1/2 loaf left, and that is the end. The children must go. We will take them farther into the wood so that they will not find their way out again. There is no other means of saving ourselves." The man's heart was heavy, and he thought, "It would be better for thee to share the last mouthful with thy children." The woman, however, would listen to nothing that he had to say, but scolded and reproached him. He who says A must say B likewise, and as he had yielded the first time, he had to do so a second time also. The children, however, were still awake and had heard the conversation. When the old folks were asleep, Hansel again got up and wanted to go out and pick up pebbles as he had done before, but the woman had locked the door, and Hansel could not get out. Nevertheless, he comforted his little sister and said, "Do not cry, Gretel. Go to sleep quietly. The good God will help us." Early in the morning came the woman and took the children out of their beds. Their piece of bread was given to them, but it was still smaller than the time before. On the way into the forest, Hansel crumbled his in his pocket and often stood still and threw a morsel on the ground. "Hansel, why dost thou stop and look round?" said the father. "Go on." "I am looking back at my little pigeon which is sitting on the roof and wants to say goodbye to me," answered Hansel. "Simpleton," said the woman, "that is not thy pigeon. That is the morning sun that is shining on the chimney." Hansel, however, little by little, threw all the crumbs on the path. The woman led the children still deeper into the forest, where they had never in their lives been before. Then a great fire was again made, and the mother said, "Just sit there, you children, and when you are tired you may sleep a little. We are going into the forest to cut wood, and in the evening when we are done we will come and fetch you away." When it was noon, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel, who had scattered his by the way. Then they fell asleep, and evening passed, but no one came to the poor children. They did not awake until it was dark night, and Hansel comforted his little sister and said, "Just wait, Gretel, until the moon rises, and then we shall see the crumbs of bread which I have strewn about. They will show us our way home again." When the moon came they set out, but they found no crumbs, for the many thousands of birds which fly about in the woods and fields had picked them all up. Hansel said to Gretel, "We shall soon find the way." But they did not find it. They walked the whole night and all the next day too, from morning till evening, but they did not get out of the forest, and were very hungry, for they had nothing to eat but 2 or 3 berries which grew on the ground. And as they were so weary that their legs would carry them no longer, they lay down beneath a tree and fell asleep. It was now 3 mornings since they had left their father's house. They began to walk again, but they always came deeper into the forest, and if help did not come soon, they must die of hunger and weariness. When it was midday, they saw a beautiful snow-white bird sitting on a bough, which sang so delightfully that they stood still and listened to it. And when its song was over, it spread its wings and flew away before them. And they followed it until they reached a little house, on the roof of which it alighted. And when they approached the little house, they saw that it was built of bread and covered with cakes, but that the windows were of clear sugar. "We will set to work on that," said Hansel, "and have a good meal. I will eat a bit of the roof, and thou, Gretel, canst eat some of the window. It will taste sweet." Hansel reached up above and broke off a little of the roof to try how it tasted, and Gretel leant against the window and nibbled at the panes. Then a soft voice cried from the parlour, "Nibble, nibble, gnaw, who is nibbling at my little house?" The children answered, the wind, the heaven-born wind," and went on eating without disturbing themselves. Hansel, who liked the taste of the roof, tore down a great piece of it, and Gretel pushed out the whole of one round window pane, sat down, and enjoyed herself with it. Suddenly the door opened, and a woman as old as the hills, who supported herself on crutches, came creeping out. Hansel and Gretel were so terribly frightened that they let fall what they had in their hands. The old woman, however, nodded her head and said, "Oh, you dear children, who has brought you here? Do come in and stay with me. No harm shall happen to you." She took them both by the hand and led them into her little house. Then good food was set before them, milk and pancakes with sugar, apples, and nuts. Afterwards 2 pretty little beds were covered with clean white linen, and Hansel and Gretel lay down in them, and thought they were in heaven. The old woman had only pretended to be so kind. She was in reality a wicked witch, who lay in wait for children, and had only built the little house of bread in order to entice them there. When a child fell into her power, she killed it, cooked, and ate it, and that was a feast day with her. Witches have red eyes, and cannot see far, but they have a keen scent like the beasts, and are aware when human beings draw near. When Hansel and Gretel came into her neighborhood, she laughed with malice and said mockingly, I have them, they shall not escape me again." Early in the morning, before the children were awake, she was already up, and when she saw both of them sleeping and looking so pretty with their plump and rosy cheeks, she muttered to herself, "That will be a dainty mouthful." Then she seized Hansel with her shriveled hand, carried him into a little stable, and locked him in behind a grated door. Scream as he might, it would not help him. Then she went to Gretel, shook her till she awoke, and cried, "Get up, lazy thing, fetch some water, and cook something good for thy brother. He is in the stable outside, and is to be made fat. When he is fat, I will eat him." Gretel began to weep bitterly, but it was all in vain. She was forced to do what the wicked witch ordered, and now the best food was cooked for poor Hansel, but Gretel got nothing but crab shells. Every morning the woman crept to the little stable and cried, "Hansel, stretch out thy finger that I may feel if thou wilt soon be fat." Hansel, however, stretched out a little bone to her, and the old woman, who had dim eyes, could not see it, and thought it was Hansel's finger, and was astonished that there was no way of fattening him. When 4 weeks had gone by, and Hansel still remained thin, she was seized with impatience and would not wait any longer. "Now then, Gretel," she cried to the girl, "stir thy stumps and fetch some water. Let Hansel be fat or lean. Tomorrow I will kill him and cook him." Ah, how the poor little sister did lament when she had to fetch the water, and how her tears did flow down her cheeks. "Dear God, do help us," she cried. "If the wild beasts in the forest had but devoured us, we should at any rate have died together." "Just keep thy noise to thyself," said the old woman. "All that won't help thee at all." Early in the morning, Gretel had to go out and hang up the cauldron with the water and light the fire. "We will bake first," said the old woman. "I have already heated the oven and kneaded the dough." She pushed poor Gretel out to the oven, from which flames of fire were darting. "Creep in," said the witch, "and see if it is properly heated so that we can put the bread in." And once Gretel was inside, she intended to shut the oven and let her bake in it, and then she would eat her too. But Gretel saw what she had in her mind and said, "I do not know how I am to do it. How do I get in?" "Silly goose," said the old woman. "The door is big enough. Just look, I can get in myself." And she crept up and thrust her head into the oven. Then Gretel gave her a push that drove her far into it and shut the iron door and fastened the bolt. Oh, then she began to howl quite horribly, but Gretel ran away and the godless witch was miserably burnt to death. Gretel, however, ran like lightning to Hansel, opened his little stable and cried, "Hansel, we are saved, the old witch is dead." Then Hansel sprang like a bird out of a cage when the door is opened. How they did rejoice and embrace each other and dance about and kiss each other. And as they had no longer any need to fear her, they went into the witch's house, and in every corner there stood chests full of pearls and jewels. "These are far better than pebbles," said Hansel, and thrust into his pockets whatever could be got in, and Gretel said, "I too will take something home with me," and filled her pinafore full. "But now we must be off," said Hansel, "that we may get out of the witch's forest." When they had walked for 2 hours, they came to a great piece of water. "We cannot get over," said Hansel. "I see no foot-plank and no bridge." "And there is also no ferry," answered Gretel, "but a white duck is swimming there. If I ask her, she will help us over." Then she cried, little duck, dost thou see? Hansel and Gretel are waiting for thee. There's never a plank or bridge in sight. Take us across on thy back so white." The duck came to them, and Hansel seated himself on its back, and told his sister to sit by him. "No," replied Gretel, "that will be too heavy for the little duck. She shall take us across one after the other." The good little duck did so, and when they were once safely across and had walked for a short time, the forest seemed to be more and more familiar to them, and at length they saw from afar their father's house. Then they began to run, rushed into the parlour and threw themselves round their father's neck. The man had not known one happy hour since he had left the children in the forest. The woman, however, was dead. Gretel emptied her pinafore until pearls and precious stones ran about the room, and Hansel threw one handful after another out of his pocket to add to them. Then all anxiety was at an end, and they lived together in perfect happiness. My tale is done. There runs a mouse. Whosoever catches it may make himself a big fur cap out of it. The Bremen Town Musicians by Brothers Grimm. A certain man had a donkey, which had carried the corn sacks to the mill indefatigably for many a long year, but his strength was going, and he was growing more and more unfit for work. Then his master began to consider how he might best save his keep, but the donkey, seeing that no good wind was blowing, ran away and set out on the road to Bremen. There, he thought, I can surely be town musician. When he had walked some distance, he found a hound lying on the road, gasping like one who had run till he was tired. "What are you gasping so for, you big fellow?" asked the donkey. "Ah," replied the dog, "as I'm old and daily grow weaker and no longer can hunt, my master wanted to kill me, so I took to flight. But now, how am I to earn my bread?" "I tell you what," said the donkey, "I am going to Bremen and shall be town musician there. Go with me and engage yourself also as a musician. I will play the lute, and you shall beat the kettle drum." The dog agreed, and on they went. Before long they came to a cat sitting on the path with a face like 3 rainy days. "Now then, old shaver, what has gone askew with you?" asked the donkey. "Who can be merry when his neck is in danger?" answered the cat. "Because I am now getting old and my teeth are worn to stumps, and I prefer to sit by the fire and spin rather than hunt about after mice. My mistress wanted to drown me, so I ran away. But now good advice is scarce. Where am I to go?" "Go with us to Bremen. You understand night music, so you can be a town musician." The cat thought well of it, and went with them. After this the 3 fugitives came to a farmyard, where the cock was sitting upon the gate, crowing with all his might. "Your crow goes through and through one," said the donkey. "What is the matter?" "I have been foretelling fine weather, because it is the day on which Our Lady washes the Christ child's little shirts and wants to dry them," said the cock. "But guests are coming for Sunday, so the housewife has no pity, and has told the cook that she intends to eat me in the soup tomorrow. And this evening I am to have my head cut off. Now I am crowing at full pitch while I can." "Ah, but Redcomb," said the donkey, "you had better come away with us. We are going to Bremen. You can find something better than death everywhere. You have a good voice, and if we make music together, it must have some quality." The cock agreed to this plan, and all 4 went on together. They could not, however, reach the city of Bremen in one day, and in the evening they came to a forest where they meant to pass the night. The donkey and the dog laid themselves down under a large tree. The cat and the cock settled themselves in the branches, but the cock flew right to the top, where he was most safe. Before he went to sleep, he looked round once more on all sides and thought he saw in the distance a little spark burning, so he called out to his companions that there must be a house not far off, for he saw a light. The donkey answered, "If so, we had better get up and go on, for the shelter here is bad." The dog thought too that a few bones with some meat on would do him good. So they made their way to the place where the light was, and as they approached it grew larger and brighter, until they came to a well-lighted robber's house. The donkey, as the biggest, went to the window and looked in. "What do you see, my grey horse?" asked the cock. "What do I see?" answered the donkey. "A table covered with good things to eat and drink, and robbers sitting at it enjoying themselves." "That would be the sort of thing for us," said the cock. "Yes, yes, ah, how I wish we were there," said the donkey. Then the animals took counsel together how they should manage to drive away the robbers, and at last they thought of a plan. The donkey was to place himself with his 4 feet upon the window ledge. The dog was to jump on the donkey's back. The cat was to climb up on the dog, And lastly, the cock was to fly up and perch upon the cat's head. When this was done, at a given signal, they began to perform their music together. The donkey brayed, the dog barked, the cat mewed, and the cock crowed. They made such a tremendous noise, and it was so unearthly, that the robbers sprang up, thinking no otherwise than that a ghost had come in, and fled in a great fright out into the forest. The four companions now sat down at the table, well content with what was left, and ate as if they were going to fast for a month. As soon as the four minstrels had done, they put out the light, and each sought for himself a sleeping place according to his nature and to what suited him. The donkey laid himself down upon some straw in the yard, the dog behind the door, the cat upon the hearth near the warm ashes, and the cock perched himself upon a beam of the roof, and being tired with their long walk, they soon went to sleep. When it was past midnight, and the robbers saw from afar that the light was no longer burning in their house, and all appeared quiet, the captain said, "We ought not to have let ourselves be frightened out of our wits," and ordered one of them to go and examine the house. The messenger, finding all still, went into the kitchen to light a candle, and taking the glistening fiery eyes of the cat for live coals, he held a match to them to light it. But the cat did not understand the joke, and flew in his face, spitting and scratching. He was dreadfully frightened and ran to the back door, but the dog who lay there sprang up and bit his leg, and as he ran across the yard by the straw heap, the donkey gave him a smart kick with his hind foot. The cock too, who had been awakened by the noise and had become lively, cried down from the beam, "Cock-a-doodle-doo." Then the robber ran back as fast as he could to his captain and said, There is a horrible witch sitting in the house, who spat on me and scratched my face with her long claws. And by the door stands a man with a knife, who stabbed me in the leg. And in the yard lies a black monster who beat me with a wooden club. And above, upon the roof, sits the judge, who called out, "Bring the rogue here to me." So I got away as well as I could. After this, the robbers never again dared enter the house, but it suited the four musicians of Bremen so well that they did not care to leave it any more. And the mouth of him who last told this story is still warm. The Elves and the Shoemaker by Brothers Grimm. There was once a shoemaker who, through no fault of his own, had become so poor that at last he had nothing left but leather for one pair of shoes. So in the evening he cut out the shoes which he intended to begin upon the next morning, and as he had a good conscience, he lay down quietly in his bed, commended himself to God, and fell asleep. In the morning, when he had prayed and was about to sit down to work, he found the pair of shoes standing finished on his table. He was amazed, and could not understand it in the least. He took the shoes in his hand to look at them more closely. They were so neatly made that there was not one bad stitch in them, just as if they were intended for a masterpiece. Soon after, a buyer came in, and as the shoes pleased him so well, he paid more for them than was usual. And with the money, the shoemaker was able to purchase leather for 2 pairs of shoes. In the evening he cut them out, and next morning he was about to go to work with fresh courage, but had no need to do so, for when he got up they were already finished, and buyers also were not wanting, who gave him so much money that he was able to buy leather for 4 pairs of shoes. The following morning, too, he found the 4 pairs made, and so it went on constantly. What he cut out in the evening was finished by the morning, so that he soon had his honest independence again, and at last became a wealthy man. Now it befell that one evening, not long before Christmas, when the man had cut out shoes as usual, he said to his wife, "Let us stay up tonight to see who it is that lends us this helping hand." The woman liked the idea, and lighted a candle, and then they hid themselves in a corner of the room behind some clothes which were hanging there, and watched. When it was midnight, 2 pretty little naked men came, sat down by the shoemaker's table, took all the work which was cut out before them, and began to stitch, to pierce, and to hammer so cleverly and so quickly with their little fingers, that the shoemaker could not turn away his eyes for astonishment. They did not stop until all was done, and stood finished on the table. Then they ran quickly away. Next morning the woman said, "The little men have made us rich, and we really must show that we are grateful for it. They run about so, and have nothing on, and must be cold. I'll tell thee what I'll do. I will make them little shirts, coats, vests, and trousers, and knit them a pair of stockings, and do thou too make them 2 little pairs of shoes." The man said, "I shall be very glad to do it." And one evening, when everything was ready, they laid their presents all together on the table, instead of the cut-out work, and then concealed themselves to see how the little men would behave. At midnight they came bounding in and wanted to get to work at once, but as they did not find any leather cut out, only the pretty little articles of clothing, they were at first astonished, and then delighted. They dressed themselves with the greatest rapidity, and put the pretty clothes on, singing, "Now we are boys so fine to see, why should we longer cobblers be?" Then they danced and skipped and leapt over chairs and benches. At last they danced out at the door. From that time forth they came no more, but the shoemaker fared well as long as he lived, and had luck in all his undertakings. The Wolf and the 7 Young Kids by Brothers Grimm. There was once a mother goat who had 7 young kids, and she loved them dearly. One day she said to them, "I must go into the forest to fetch food for you. You must be good children, and not open the door to any stranger, for the wolf is cunning, and will try to deceive you." The kids promised faithfully, "Do not fear, dear mother. We will not open the door to any stranger." When the mother had gone, the kids began playing and jumping about the house. Soon came a knock at the door. Little kids, open the door," said a voice. But the kids said, "No, no, Father Goat has gone into the forest. You are a wicked wolf, and we will not open to you." Then the wolf went away and went to a miller and asked for some white flour. The miller gave it to him, and he rubbed his black paws with the flour, and also rubbed his face so that he looked quite white. Then he came again to the door and called, little kids, open the door. I am your mother and have brought you something." "Oh, if you are our mother, you cannot be so black," said the kids. "I have a cold and have been in the mill," said the wolf, "so my face has become white." But the youngest of the kids looked through the keyhole and saw his little feet. He was sure that it was the wolf and said, "No, no, mother, you have a very rough voice and very big paws." Then the wolf went away to the baker, and the baker rolled him in dough and baked him in the oven. Then he came back to the house and called, little kids, open the door. I am your mother, and have brought you something." "Oh, if you are our mother, you have very rough paws," said the kids. "Ah, I have been rolling in flour," said the wolf, "so my paws are rough." But the youngest looked through the keyhole again and said, "No, mother, your voice is too hoarse and your paws too big. You cannot be our mother." Then the wolf went to the blacksmith, who shaved off his black coat, and the wolf made his voice soft. Then he came back to the house and called, little kids, open the door. I am your mother and have brought you something." The youngest looked through the keyhole and said, "Oh, now your voice is soft, but your paws are too large and your teeth are sharp. You are the wolf." Then the wolf became very angry and ran away and lay down under the kitchen stove to wait until the mother came home. At last the mother returned carrying a bundle of food. She knocked at the door, and the kids ran to open it. She hugged and kissed them all and asked, "Where is my youngest child?" "Oh, mother, he is asleep under the stove," said the others. Then the mother went into the kitchen and saw the wolf lying under the stove. She fetched some scissors and cut open his belly while he was asleep. Out jumped the youngest kid, alive and safe. Then they filled the wolf's belly with heavy stones, sewed it up again, and when he awoke he tried to run away. But the stones were so heavy that he fell down and died. The mother goat and her 7 kids rejoiced, and from that day they lived happily and safely, and never opened the door to strangers again. The Juniper Tree by Brothers Grimm. Long ago, at least 2,000 years, there was a rich man and a good and beautiful wife, and they loved each other dearly, but they had no children. They wished for them very much, but the wife remained always, as it were, unfruitful. At last, however, she once stood under the juniper tree in the yard, and felt so sad that she fainted. Then she went home and said, "Ah, if I had but a child, as red as blood and as white as snow." And while she thus spoke, she became quite happy, and felt sure she should have one. And her time was come, and the wife bore a child as white as snow and as red as blood. And when she saw it, she was so glad that she died. Her husband buried her under the juniper tree, and he began to weep sorely. After some time, however, he was comforted, and took another wife. By the second wife he had a daughter, but the first wife's child was a son, and he was as red as blood and as white as snow. When the wife looked at her daughter, she loved her very much, but she looked at the boy with deadly hatred, and thought whenever she could how she should get the whole of her husband's property for her daughter. And the evil one put it into her mind, so that she took great hatred towards the boy, and drove him about from one corner to another, and cuffed him here, and cuffed him there, so that the poor child went about in fear. When he came home from school, there was nowhere for him to be quiet. Once the woman had gone into her room, and her little daughter went up to her and said, "Mother, give me an apple." "Yes, my child," said the woman, and gave her a beautiful apple out of the chest. And the chest had a great heavy lid with a great sharp iron lock. "Mother," said the little daughter, "shall not brother have one too?" This made the woman angry, but she said, "Yes, when he comes out of school." Now as she saw out of the window that he was coming, it was just as if the evil one came over her, and she snatched at the apple, and took it away again from her daughter, saying, "Thou shalt not have one before thy brother." She threw the apple into the chest and shut it. Then the little boy came in at the door, and the evil one made her say kindly to him, "My son, wilt thou have an apple?" And she looked wickedly at him. "Mother," said the boy, "how dreadful you look. Yes, give me an apple." Then it seemed to her as if she must persuade him. "Come with me," said she, and lifted up the lid of the chest. "Take out an apple for thyself." And while the boy was stooping inside, the evil one prompted her, and crash, down went the lid, and off went the little boy's head. Then she was much frightened, and thought, "If I could but make them think it was not done by me." So she went up into her room to her chest of drawers, and took a white cloth out of the top drawer, and set the head again upon the neck, and bound it with the handkerchief, so that nothing could be seen, and set him on a chair in front of the door, and put the apple in his hand. After this, Marlinchen, her little daughter, came up to her mother, who was standing by the fire with a pan of hot water before her, and said, "Mother, brother is sitting at the door, and he has an apple in his hand. And when I asked him to give me one, he did not answer me, and looked so pale." "Go again to him," said the mother, "and if he will not answer thee, give him a box on the ear." So Marlinchen went and said, "Brother, give me the apple." But he was silent, so she gave him one on the ear, and the head fell off. The little girl was terrified, and ran to her mother and said, "Alas, mother, I have knocked my brother's head off." And she wept, and could not be comforted. "Marlinchen," said the mother, "what hast thou done? But be quiet, and let no one know it. It cannot be helped now. We will make him into black puddings." And the mother took the little boy and chopped him in pieces, put him into the pan and made him into black puddings. But Marlinchen stood by, crying and crying, and all her tears fell into the pan, and they had no need of salt. When the father came home, he sat down at the table and said, "Where is my son?" The mother brought in a great dish of black puddings, and Marlinchen wept without ceasing. The father again said, "Where is my son?" "Ah," said the mother, "he is gone into the country to his mother's great uncle. He will stay there a while." "What has he gone there for? And he never even said goodbye to me." "Oh, he wanted to go and asked me if he might stay 6 weeks. He will be well taken care of there." "Dear wife," said the man, "how badly you have done. You ought to have asked me first about it." "Oh, never mind about it," said the woman. "Do eat something." "Ah," said the man, "I feel so sorrowful. It is not right. He ought to have said goodbye to me." With that he began to eat and said, "Marlinchen, why art thou crying? Thy brother will certainly come back." Then he said, "Wife, the food is delicious. Give me some more." And the more he ate, the more he wanted, and he said, "Give me some more. You shall not have any of it. It seems to me as if it were all mine." And he ate, and threw the bones under the table, till he had finished it all. Marlinchen went to her chest of drawers, took her best silk handkerchief out of the bottom drawer, and gathered all the bones from beneath the table, and tied them up in it, and carried them outside the door, weeping tears of blood. She laid them under the juniper tree in the green grass, and as soon as she had done so, all at once she felt lightened of her grief and wept no more. And the juniper tree began to move itself, and the branches waved together, then moved asunder, and so on, just as if they were clapping hands for joy. After this, a mist came round the tree, and in the midst of the mist there burned a fire, and out of the fire there flew a beautiful bird that rose high into the air, and after it was gone the juniper tree remained just as before, and a handkerchief with the bones no longer lay there. Marlinchen, however, felt as light and happy as if her brother were still alive, and went merrily home and sat down to dinner. The bird flew away and lighted on a goldsmith's house and began to sing, "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister, little Marlinchen, gathered together all my bones, tied them in a silken handkerchief, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Kiewit, Kiewit, what a beautiful bird am I." The goldsmith was sitting in his workshop making a golden chain. When he heard the bird which was sitting and singing on his roof, he thought the song very pretty and stood up. But as he crossed the threshold, he lost one of his slippers. However, he went right up the middle of the street with only one slipper and one sock on. He had his apron on, and in one hand he had the golden chain, and in the other the pincers, and the sun shone bright up the street. He went right on, stood still, and said to the bird, "Sing that song again." "Nay," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Give that golden chain, and I will sing it again for thee." "There," said the goldsmith, "there is the golden chain for thee. Now sing me that song again." Then the bird came and took the golden chain in his right claw, and went and sat in front of the goldsmith and sang, "My mother, she killed me. My father, he ate me. My sister, little Marlinchen, gathered together all my bones, tied them in a silken handkerchief, laid them beneath the juniper tree. Kiewit, Kiewit, what a beautiful bird am I." Then the bird flew away to a shoemaker and lighted on his roof and sang, "My mother, she killed me." The shoemaker heard it and ran out of doors in his shirt sleeves and looked up at his roof, and was obliged to hold his hand before his eyes lest the sun should blind him. "Bird," said he, "how beautifully thou canst sing. Sing me that song again." "Nay," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Thou must give me something. I have not got anything so beautiful as thou, only my red shoes, if indeed I might have them." So the bird came down and took the red shoes in his left claw and flew up again on the roof and sang, "My mother, she killed me." When he had finished, he flew away and seated himself on a mill, and he sang, "My mother, she killed me." The miller heard him and ordered all his men to run out. Then he went out himself and saw the bird, and he called to it, "How beautifully thou singest. Sing me that song once more." "Nay," said the bird, "I do not sing twice for nothing. Give me the millstone, and I will sing it again." "Yes," said he, "if it belonged to me only, thou shouldst have it." "Yes," said the others, "if he sings again, he shall have it." Then the bird came down, and all the millers helped him up with the stone. The bird put the chain round his neck, and the shoes in his claws, and flew away to his father's house. In the room sat the father, the mother, and Marlinchen at the table. The father said, "How light-hearted I feel, how happy I am." "Nay," said the mother, "I feel very low, just as if a heavy storm were coming." But Marlinchen sat weeping. Then the bird came flying, and as it seated itself on the roof, the father said, "Ah, I feel so truly happy, and the sun is shining so bright. It is as if I were going to see some old friend again." "Nay," said the wife, "I am terrified, my teeth chatter, and I feel as if there were fire in my veins." And she tore open her bodice even more. Marlinchen sat in a corner crying, and her head was wrapped in a handkerchief. Then the bird began to sing, "My mother, she killed me." Then the mother stopped her ears and shut her eyes and would not see or hear, but it throbbed and throbbed in her head, just as if the storm were coming. And her cap fell off her head, and she tore her hair out and threw it away and sat there and looked very strange. The bird sang again, "My mother, she killed me." Then the father sat up and laughed. Ah, how beautiful is that song! The sun shines so warm and it smells so much like cinnamon. Marlinchen wept and laid her head on her knees. Then the bird sang once more, "My mother, she killed me." Then Marlinchen sprang up, and she felt as if she were going into another world. And the bird threw down the golden chain, and it fell just round the father's neck, so that it fitted him exactly. Then he stood up and put it on, and he felt all at once so light-hearted and happy as if he were young again. The bird sang once more, "My mother, she killed me." Then the red shoes which he had thrown down fell in front of Marlinchen, and she jumped up and put them on, and she stood up quite lightly and danced and leaped for joy. Then the bird sang once more, "My mother, she killed me." Then he threw down the millstone, and it fell on the mother's head, and she was crushed to death. The father and Marlinchen heard it, and went out and were released from their troubles, and then they saw smoke and flames and fire rise up, and when that was past there stood before them their little son. And he took them both by the hand, and they were all three very happy, and went into the house to dinner and ate.